while in the West, and of course in other countries, the public discourse around the war in the Middle East focuses on Israel's alleged attacks against the Palestinians, focuses on Palestinian casualties, real and imagined, and blames Israel for that. Um, in Israel, the conversation is very much about the hostages. It's about the hostages remaining in Hamas captivity, and about specifically about the need, as many Israelis put it, for a deal with Hamas to exchange, terrorists and end terrorists plus all sorts of demands relating to the war in exchange for those remaining hostages. Israeli media is very much united, other than a few right-wing outlets that the left likes to call for banning. Most of Israeli media is united in the demands for a hostage deal. These demands are demands of Netanyahu's government, which in essence means they are saying that what Netanyahu is happy to give, the capitulation that Netanyahu is offering, is insufficient, and he should give in to all of Hamas's demands. Now, we know with the history of Israel's negotiation with Palestinians, you can give them everything they say they want, and they will say, actually, no, no deal, or we want more. And so there is something about the way public discourse has shifted in Israel from the few days after October 7th, when the hostages were very much a part of the conversation, but so was defeating Hamas. So was the acknowledgement that there's an enemy here that needs to be dealt with in a different way from how it has been dealt with up until then, to people forgetting that other than the hostages remaining, there were other hostages taken. There were people murdered, many more people murdered than taken hostage, and that the mastermind of this attack was released in a previous hostage deal where Israel gave over 1,000 terrorists to in exchange for one soldier. Without that, Hamas would not be, peace-loving hippies, but they would not have the mastermind of this specific terrorist attack. And that's a point worth noting. And of course, there's a lot more worth noting in the discussion of whether or not there should be such a deal. That is what we're going to be discussing today. Welcome to the reality show. I'm joined by Daniel, Matthew, and Anders. Anders, I will go to you first. Your thoughts on this.
Well, you have to understand, I think, that the families of the remaining hostages are putting a lot of pressure on the Israeli government. I don't think you can fault them for that. Now, we have said on this show since the war started that giving in to Hamas's demand will never end well, neither in the short term nor in the long term, because if all of these Palestinian prisoners or terrorists are returned to Hamas, yeah, they may lie low for a while, but in 5, 10, 15 years, it will all be back to square one, and we'll start to see renewed attacks again. And as you touched on, Israel has a history of very lopsided uh, hostage exchanges and prisoner exchanges. You mentioned the one soldier that was exchanged for 1,000 prisoners, but there have been several of those over the decades since well, all the way back till the 1948 war, I believe. They were not as lopsided in the beginning, but Israel has consistently exchanged its soldiers and hostages for multiples of Arabs or Palestinians in pretty much every exchange that has taken place. And of course, Hamas knows that. And they are, I guess, basically sitting back and waiting for this to play out in Israel. And the fact that that it tends to be forgotten that so many people were murdered here, I think that's that's very unfortunate, but I think that's probably part of human nature that we kind of try to cope with the terrible things in life and move on from there. I don't know if that explains it, but it's unfortunate, absolutely. But we are where we are.
Matthew.
Well, I think the issue with negotiating with terrorists generally is that you effectively encourage or you're rewarding the behavior, you're rewarding what they've done, and if anything, actually encouraging a repeat of the behavior. I think it actually well, you may get some hostages released in the immediate term. You're encouraging more kidnapping attempts, more terrorism further down the line. Which you can clearly see, as you say, in that as you were saying, Razi, in that Israel previously did a hostage release deal, release some Hamas prisoners, and one of them is now one of the masterminds of what actually happened on October the 7th. There's a concrete example right there. Completely sympathise with the families of the hostages. I understand, I empathise. I understand exactly where they're coming from. They want their people home safe. I just don't think, honestly, that negotiating or giving concessions to Hamas is the way to do it.
Daniel.
Yeah, so maybe to mention a bit more about the sort of the families on the hostages of the hostages, because they are part of this sort of push for negotiation. And yeah, it's understandable. I believe if I'm not mistaken, Noah Argaman's boyfriend is actually still one of the hostages. She is one of the hostages that was actually rescued and not negotiated for. And it takes a philosophy, it takes like principles to understand why negotiation is wrong, and then it takes integrity to basically follow up with that. But we've already seen this sort of like real integrity. I mean, I always like to bring up this story. We had a situation where I believe 3 hostages were actually killed by the IDF by mistake, and a mother of one of those hostages actually called that company, that military group, and said something, paraphrasing like, "This is not your fault. This is all on Hamas, and I understand. I understand why it's so hard to operate in Gaza, and I forgive you. I don't blame you. I know who is actually at fault." So we've already seen that. I think it's really moralizing, basically improving morale, to know that there are Israelis who know what needs to be done and are willing to basically go full in. And maybe just to bring in some context, because there's actually one news that came up. So first, Knesset actually voted against Palestinian statehood. I think that happened today. So I don't know how committed this is. New government could come in and like just change it. But I think it's good to see, especially since just before Benjamin Netanyahu is actually going to the US. So I think, while symbolic, I think it at least shows some sort of commitment to survival of Israel, I guess. And one thing more that came out, apparently IDF wants to establish a brigade specifically for guarding Philadelphia corridor, even after basically, if there was the sort of deal that basically this brigade would guard Philadelphia corridor, which is the border between Gaza and Egypt, even after all of IDF withdrawal, which I think goes against the deal. But again, this is one more, at least, positive news coming out, that I think is positive. So there was just a couple of positive news I'd like to bring up.
Yeah. Sorry to rain on your parade and challenge whether this is positive. Yeah, it's nice that Israel is posturing in their negotiation and saying, look, we're prepared to stay in the Philadelphia corridor forever. Of course, they should stay there and in the rest of Gaza forever, but they're not going to. And I don't believe that if this was the issue that was separating a deal where all the hostages come home from no deal, I don't believe that Netanyahu would stick to it. This vote in the Knesset, I think it was 68-9 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
It's 100.
to understand the rest of those, so about 50 didn't even come in. So
Yeah.
usually when you don't come in, it means you are against it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. 68 out of 120 voted against the Palestinian state less than a year after the Palestinians showed what they do without having a state. So the fact that so many people, so many members of Knesset chose not to show up and say, of course, we are against the creation of a state for the people who committed the atrocities on October 7th, says something. It says, we're not going to vote against it right now because we kind of want to get elected whenever there's an election. But when the time comes and we have a partner for negotiation, an Arafat-like peacemaker, then we will vote. We will change our mind. So yeah, I saw that vote as very much a negative. 68 is more or less the right-wing bloc, plus maybe Lieberman. I didn't go through the list of who voted there. A few other points. Understanding the families who are involved in this. Absolutely. If a family, if it was a loved one of mine, I'd say let the world burn and let them get out. But the media doesn't have to highlight it. The media chooses like we said with the BBC, they choose to focus on that story of the guy with Down syndrome who was killed as the family tells that story. That is their choice. The Israeli media chooses, instead of saying every day, why isn't Hamas defeated? Why is Hezbollah not defeated? Why are so many people in the north of Israel not able to go home? They choose to talk about why has Israel not capitulated enough to Hamas in this negotiation. A couple of other points. Oh, and another point, Daniel, it's not all the families. Some of the families are against this. Some of the families, this is not mentioned in Israeli media either, but many members of families of hostages are participating or were participating in the protests, trying to block the aid trucks, which is, as I've said on this show, the only protest I would gladly participate in. And yeah, not all of them think that the way to do it is to basically throw in the towel. Yeah. And another point, although this is not a major point, but Anders, you said that you release the terrorists, maybe they'll lie low for 5 to 10 years. That's not the case. First of all, when they released, it's an image of victory, and they make sure those images get out, just like they made sure the images from what they did on October 7th got out, because they know their culture. They know how this is going to be received. So October 7th, look, we commit the worst possible atrocities against the Jews. We can do this to the Jews, and we can do this to the Jews we haven't done this to yet. And then the release will be, look, even after we do that, the Jews are still so afraid of us that they will release us. So yeah, I think the victory for Hamas is immediate, and the murder might be 5 to 10 years, or might be the next day, depending on when they get the chance. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat, and thank you, Jonathan, for another super chat. Anders.
I think that's an interesting perspective. So you actually think that Hamas or Hezbollah or whatever, they could come back pretty quickly after a deal has been negotiated?
I think Hamas has been hurt, but they haven't been hurt that bad. They're still fighting back. So I would be surprised if we saw another October 7th level attack from Gaza immediately, because I think that's going to be difficult to do. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that from the West Bank, for example.
Okay.
Or
And
against
I actually want to follow up with
Jews,
yeah.
or against Jews or Israeli targets outside of Israel.
Well, that's true as well. Yeah. So I actually want to follow up with another question of you regarding the Israeli media landscape. From the way you're telling it, it sounds like um, and this is from someone who is not following Israeli media very closely, but it sounds like it's almost a mirror of mainstream media here in the U.S. With is it a leftist tilt or what is the bias, if you like?
I think it's a heavily leftist tilt. Now, left and right in Israel are a little bit different than what we kind of. I mean, it's difficult to understand what left and right means anywhere. I think in Israel it's a little bit easier to understand because the left tends to be in favor of more concessions to Israel's enemies, and the right supposedly tends to be not in favor of that. Although I think that's mostly true of their rhetoric and not their actions. But yeah, the media, with that left-right spectrum, the media is definitely, by and large, more to the left.
Okay.
Maybe I wanted to just quickly, because Anders mentioned or asked Razi about, if Hamas could come back. But so it's important to remember, if the deal goes through, Hamas is not being dismantled. Hamas, well, it's supposed to lose the governing capacity in Gaza, but the leadership will still go on. It will basically become, and this is my prediction for the future, if this deal comes through, Hamas is just going to become what PLO used to be, sort of hiding in different countries around the Middle East, still attacking Israel until Israel negotiates with Hamas and allows them to establish not a state, but some sort of like governing capacity in Gaza. And it looks unbelievable now, but that's what happened with PLO. PLO used to attack Israel regularly. It was hiding in Lebanon, it was hiding in different countries. And with Oslo Accords, they negotiate with them and allow them to basically establish some sort of governing capacity in the West Bank. So I think this is one of the not even alternatives. I mean, this is one of the things that I think will happen if this deal actually goes through.
Yeah, and Israel is negotiating with Hamas now. Yeah, they're not negotiating a peace settlement, but they are negotiating. So they're, acknowledging their existence as if it's a negotiating partner, it somewhat legitimizes them. And of course, this is like we knew, and people who question that, scroll back. It's still on the channel. The show that we did on October 7th. A few hours after the attack started, before it ended, at the time there were 22 confirmed deaths. I remember when we went live. The show we did on October 8th, show we did on October 9th, when we heard the rhetoric from Netanyahu, from the Israeli government, we're going to destroy Hamas, and we knew that is not going to. We definitely knew by October 9th when we did a show titled "Why Israel Can't Win," and we talked not about their military capabilities, but about the moral, let's say, issues with the morality that guides how Israel fights. So yeah, Israel is very much, however this war ends, Israel is accepting Hamas as a force that's gonna continue to exist, and that is a victory for them. And this goes back, Matthew, to a point that you were making about how releasing hostages encourages repeat behavior, and allowing Hamas to continue to exist also encourages that repeat behavior. And of course, this deal would have both. Hamas continues to exist. They get a lot of their terrorists back. They're still, whatever Israel tells us, they're still going to be in control of Gaza to a large extent. They're still going to have a large presence in the West Bank. Their leaders are still going to be fine in their five-star hotels in Qatar, and and basically that will be the result of the war. It will be a Hamas victory. Matthew.
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly, the only way they're genuinely going to win, if it's even feasible, is to firstly completely end Hamas, completely destroy them. But even then, there's almost a sort of philosophical or ideological kind of problem, because you've got other individuals and groups who have similar, or roughly similar ideology, anti-Israel, pro to Islamic theocracy. You've got all these other countries bobbing around in the Middle East, some of them, such as Iran, we know they back these groups. So even if this deal actually doesn't come in, Israel's still really not going to be winning. I mean, what does victory even look like at this point?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, victory, I would say victory at this point looks like victory would have looked like on day one, but that is not something Israel is doing. And that's why also, we had like a celebratory episode last Saturday on this channel when the news of Mohammed Deif's assassination attempt, or not assassination attempt, the attempt to kill him was apparently successful. And I mentioned then, and I mentioned a few times since, that what I like about that attempt on his life, unlike previous ones, is that they used 8 tons of bombs. They destroyed the whole area. They were not gonna, if he was really there, he would be dead no matter what, and the people around him would be dead. That was the one instance, I think, of Israel truly fighting this war properly. There was also one instance where, if you're gonna try to release the hostages, Israel did that properly, and that was the release of Noah Al-Gamani and 3 other hostages when there was really overwhelming firepower. There were, according to the Palestinians, hundreds killed, so probably at least dozens. But um, but yeah, those are 2 instances in over 9 months. So I do think it is insufficient. Willful Thinker says, I don't understand Razi's view. The hostage families are rational or not in demanding capitulation to Hamas? No, they're not rational. But what I'm saying is they have more of an excuse than the media has in highlighting them, and in pushing that agenda as what now needs to be done after what happened, and after what happened, which again was not just hostage taking, was Hamas invading Israel, occupying parts of Israel, and slaughtering a huge number of people. Thank you, Apollo Zeus, for gifting an Ayn Rand Center UK YouTube membership. Daniel.
So, Matthew brought up a good point about basically how will the aftermath look. And, the biggest problem, well, not a problem, but the most important thing when fighting a war is knowing who you're fighting. And I don't think Israel knows that. Israel is not fighting Hamas. Israel is fighting Palestinians. Israel is fighting what made Hamas possible. Whenever I talked about Western politics, I always talk about how I don't really care about politicians. I don't blame them. I don't, in a sense, have any opinion on them, because I think they are just result of whatever the people want. And Hamas is just a result of what the Palestinians want. So you have to recognize what made Hamas possible. You have to recognize the fact that Israel is fighting the Palestinian people. And it might not mean specifically, every single one, but it is fighting the sort of dominant culture, the sort of dominant philosophy that is guiding most of the Palestinians. And that's why Israel in the past has failed to basically change Gaza, to basically turn it has, because Israel has managed this once. It has turned the Arabs in Israel proper into Israeli citizens. So it managed it once. It didn't manage it the second time. It didn't turn Palestinians into actual Israel, possible future Israeli citizens. And unless it does that, unless it figures out that this is the only way this conflict can be resolved, that the fact that they need to change the culture of the Palestinians, that's the only way this can ever actually be solved.
I want to quickly go to a couple of comments in the chat. One is just, I think, relatively easy for me to answer. What do you guys think about Benny Morris? I am not a fan, but I do recommend was it 2 shows that we did about that debate that he and Destiny did with Norman Finkelstein, and Daniel will hopefully remember the other guy's name. And the other guy, whoever he was, yeah, and I recommend watching.
Muan Rabani.
What?
Muan Rabani.
Yeah, that's the one. So yeah, I said what I remember saying is that the only one I liked in that debate was Destiny. Okay, there's a couple of other. Actually, you know what? So Jared asks. Or says, you need to ask these people who want to bring back the hostages at any cost what that actually means. If what was required to ensure their return was giving Hamas nuclear or chemical weapons, would they see that as an acceptable compromise? And we don't even have to go that far. By the way, Israel may or may not have nuclear weapons. We don't know. It's unofficial. But anyway, yeah, there's, even with the stuff that Hamas, Hamas would likely agree to a deal now if Israel says, okay, we'll pull back completely and not come back, and we'll give you, everybody who's in prison, which I think was what Hamas was saying in the first few days, like we're going to release everybody who's in prison. So yeah, would they agree to that? But look, on as a principle, they are saying, this when Hamas takes hostages, all is fair, basically. What they want is what they get, or we give them part of it. So they are they're again, it's the very idea of this negotiation, I think, legitimizes Hamas. And I don't know to what extent the protesters realize it, but that is they are protesting for Hamas. Anders.
Yes, so in terms of understanding the consequences, I mean, Israel has had so many opportunities to learn to understand the consequences over the years. I was just looking at the timeline here, and yeah, so it was in 2011 that, and I will probably butcher his name, Gilad Shalit was exchanged for 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. And that was the major exchange before the current war. And then it was back in 2000s or 2008, 2007, 2003. And it has always been these lopsided exchanges. So, I mean, I don't think we can expect that today's generation will understand it any better, because, I mean, Israel hasn't learned the lessons from the previous exchanges. So unfortunately, I don't know what it would take to get through to them.
Yeah, learning the lessons of history is important. Thank you, Jonathan, for another super chat. And in that on that topic, Jonathan says, must recommend objectivist John David Lewis is nothing less than victory on moral warfare. Yeah, this is a book that teaches many of the lessons of history. By the way, yeah, I banged the book on the table. But by the way, there's a picture of Netanyahu from a few years ago in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, holding this book, like walking around with this book. I don't know if that means he was reading it, or if this was a way to tell Hamas, just so you know, I'm reading this. I'm sure they've all read it. Yeah, this is why I hold Netanyahu to account more. I consider him more guilty than most, because he definitely knows better. Not only has he read books that make it clear, he's also written them. and isn't even following his own advice, let alone John David Lewis's advice. So yeah, Netanyahu must go, as I like to say from time to time, but I even when I'm not saying it, I stand by it. Matthew.
Uh, well, question, I suppose, particularly for Razi, really, because I know you're following what's going on in Israel. Why do you think there is such a widespread attitude in the media there and so forth, so almost being in favour of negotiation? Where do you think it all comes from?
I think it comes from a wrongly applied appreciation of life and understanding of the value of life. I mean, when Muslim preachers say we love death more than you love life, they mean what they say. And I think in Israel, the value of life is so great that the idea that anybody from Israel, let alone so many, are being held, and they're not just being held, they're being held in the most horrific conditions by the most horrible savages in the world, and so it's difficult not to think about that and you know feel horrible that it's happening. Uh, so that I understand. And it comes from, not thinking longer term and not thinking, okay, if we do this deal now, the hostages might come home, and then we will deal with 1,000 or 10,000 hostages in the future, or thousands and thousands of murdered civilians. And unfortunately, there isn't that longer term thinking. Whereas, by the way, I think Hamas has more of that longer term thinking. They were happy to do a ceasefire pretty much after they were done on October 7th, which is why I've said on this channel repeatedly, those calling for a ceasefire are supporting Hamas, are calling for essentially the extermination of the Jews in Israel, even if they don't fully understand that, because that's what it means. It means Hamas has also said we will do October 7th again and again until there are no more Jews left to kill. And again, and the reason they want a ceasefire is because they can't do that right now. They need time to regroup. They need the IDF out of there. The IDF is making it not as easy for them as it would be otherwise. And yeah, it's really unfortunate, and this is why the title is as harsh as it is of this episode. I do think it's suicidal of Israel to even entertain this idea, and what needs to be what you need to do, even when thinking about the hostages, is to overwhelm the Palestinians with firepower like they've never seen before, including in this current war, and tell them this will all be over as soon as you release the hostages.
So, Rossi, there must be a large element of evasion involved here too, right? Because we know that the Islamists, or they take the long view on this. They're working on, they have a view of centuries, basically, that they're very patient in a way, in that way. Because I mean, the effrontery of these lands having gone out of hand of Islam. That's basically, they're not done until those lands have been reclaimed, and which is the basis for wiping Israel off of the face of the earth. But I mean, this is out in the open. It's there. It's not like it's a secret. So there must be Israeli intellectuals who understand this. But still, it seems like it doesn't sink in, or it isn't propagated. So where lies the evasion here? Is it, and why?
That's a good question. I mean, there are some people who I think are knowingly doing that which will cause harm, and it's always nobody wants to believe. You want to believe that even when somebody advocates for communism or whatever, they actually think everybody's going to be better off. I don't I don't believe that. I definitely don't believe that when it comes to serious intellectuals on the Israeli left who are who know who they're dealing with, and choose to claim that the victims in this case, Israel, are actually the bad guys, because we talked yesterday about the illegal, or a few days ago, about the illegal occupation. So there's always an excuse. There's always a some law somewhere that says that Israel is wrong. But yeah, people know what Islam is. By the way, the same is true of Britain, and we talked about this, I think, last week. Uh, in Britain, we have Muslim preachers, Islamist preachers, who are very clear about wanting to turn this country into to have Sharia law here. We spoke about at least two of the more famous ones, arguing basically for relationships with kids, and saying that age of consent laws are some Western liberal thing that they don't have to abide by. And the police knows about them as well in this country, but the police would rather knock on the door of a 12-year-old kid here, Jewish kid, who tweets that Hamas needs to be annihilated. So yeah, I think the intellectuals and those kind of further down also know what they're doing, and it scares me, really. It scares me, uh, for the future of Israel. It scares me for the future of all of the West.
Uh, yeah, maybe I can bring it back. Well, first of all, the idea that age of consent laws are Western, sort of liberal thing. Yeah, they are. It is a certain achievement of developing the system of rights, developing the idea that, yeah, a 12-year-old boy or girl are not able to consent on the same level as a 20-year-old. So yeah, when I'll take that. I'll take that hit from the Islamists. And then maybe to bring it back to, basically, you should ask yourself questions. Well, why is Hamas taking the hostages? Why is Hamas's policy to basically, yeah, go in, kill as many as you can, and then before IDF can come back, try to take as many hostages, as many even IDF personnel, just whoever you can grab, just take them. It is because they know they will be able to, for one, they will be able to negotiate with Israel. They have, you should learn from what you've done in the past, and they have learned that when they take hostages, they will be able to trade them and get their killers back, who will be caught. And the second part is that they know that the media and people will apply pressure on Israel not to rescue the hostages, but to specifically negotiate for them. And there was an article that came out about so some of the photos have recently got out about the horrible conditions that the hostages are kept in Gaza, and they are truly horrible. We've heard even from the rescued, or even the hostages we got back from negotiations, that yeah, the conditions are real terrible. But what is the outcome? What do the medias basically make of that? Israel should negotiate, should really try hard to get the hostages back. There was a recent New York Times article that came out. It's like an interactive map, and the title is "How the Israeli Hostage Rescue Led to One of Gaza's Deadliest Days." So even when Israel does bring back the hostages, but it does by rescuing them, that's not right, because Palestinians are dying. That's not the right way to actually bring them home. You have to submit, you have to negotiate. That's the only way that is appropriate to do it. You cannot do it by actually doing what's proper, going in, rescuing them, and yeah, Palestinians dying in the meantime. They shouldn't keep hostages in their home if they are not willing to put their life on it.
Yeah. So Open Root says, I saw Rotherham firsthand, never mind Sheffield City Center. Yeah, that's the thing when you talk about okay, they can talk about age of consent laws. The thing is, it's not that they talk about it as as an abstract not connected with reality kind of thing, they talk about it as something that they are objecting to and don't necessarily see the need to respect. And of course, we know that there are Muslim grooming gangs in the UK, and we've seen some of them actually getting caught, and instances where the police knew about them and didn't want to do anything because they would be accused of racism. Thank you, Bonnie, for being a member of the YouTube channel for 26 months. Bonnie says, is the first episode of James's constitutional law series going away for YouTube members today? Could we please keep access to just the first? It's priceless. First of all, thanks for the many compliments about the first session of James's course. I want to find that statement from Bonnie. Okay, I'll find it at some point, and I'll read it out again. It is going away today. We're going to keep it on for a bit longer than the exact 24-hour point, just so that people can watch it right after this show. But yeah, it is only for a week, and from today, all past sessions, well, as of now, there's only one, but past sessions and live sessions are open to members at the Reardon Medal and Midas Mulligan levels only. This is, of course, James is a former state prosecutor. James is knowledgeable about many things. I think there's nothing he's as knowledgeable about as this, and he is a fantastic presenter as well. So we put it at the highest levels of membership because we really think that it is worth that. And yeah, so but there is a good chance that in the future we'll make it available as its own thing, or parts of it as its own thing. So, but as of now, members, YouTube members, all levels can access it after the show for a little bit longer, and it will go down later today. Matthew.
Having trouble getting off mute. So I was just thinking about the point Daniel made a couple of minutes ago that it seems like Israel's always portrayed as being in the wrong, no matter what they do. Like you gave the example, there was a successful rescue of some of the hostages, and the media focused on the number of casualties that were caused in the process. It seems to reflect the sort of wider kind of almost malaise in the culture and in the way not just the media, but a lot of people generally seem to approach these things. It's like the people's sort of understanding of right and wrong seems to somehow be completely warped, and they can't they can't judge, they can't tell the difference. It's like everyone just I think I've made a similar point on this channel before, but everyone seems to, how do I put it, it's almost as though the Palestinians are just perceived as somehow the victim or the underdog, and Israel's somehow perceived as kind of the big nasty overgrown playground bully almost, and no one can actually, well, I say no one, but many people, the media, the protesters and so forth, they're not able to really judge the issue objectively and understand genuinely what is right and what is wrong. And it's not just something I perceive in the Israel-Gaza situation, although it's very, very prominent there. I think it's a wider sort of cultural problem.
Yeah, of course, the idea of supporting the Palestinians because they're the underdogs is A, factually incorrect, and B, not at all relevant. So they're not the underdog because Israel is surrounded by savages who want to wipe Israel off the map. the Palestinians are their front line, but they're surrounded by these countries. And of course, if you look at any General Assembly vote in the UN, and most of those votes are about Israel. If you look at those votes, you can see that Israel is very much hated around the world. So it is the underdog, but that doesn't matter. You can't, if you're the underdog, you don't have carte blanche, to do whatever you want to whoever you want, and say, well, we're the underdog, we're the oppressed, we're just resisting. But yeah, this is why the left loves the Palestinians. Why the right loves the Palestinians? I think they tend to be a bit more less dishonest about it. Let's say at least some parts of the right. Anders.
Yeah, I was thinking, actually, if I may just briefly shift gears a little bit. As we all know, the current political situation here in the US has changed quite relatively dramatically over the last few weeks, and it now looks like the consensus is that Trump will cruise to victory here in November. Who knows if that is true or not, but that seems to be the general sentiment right now. And I was just, and again, who knows what kind of foreign policy will come out of this? Because as we know, Trump is a loose cannon, and he can change his views on anything overnight, basically. But is this change in dynamics in the U.S. Right now, is that in any way, shape, or form influencing Israeli sentiments and what they think about the future of the war and the current situation with respect to hostages and the war in general?
I don't know if with respect to hostages, I think in general, Israel, especially the Israeli leadership, and especially Netanyahu, like to have the U.S. to blame for Israel's inaction. It's always very convenient to say, well, we would totally do everything that needs to be done, but Biden won't let us. So I don't know. I think it'll be a bit more difficult to sell when Trump is there, although maybe not that difficult. But yeah, generally speaking, and I think this is true. Trump is a loose cannon. He seems to be better for Israel, but much worse, for Ukraine and in many other respects. So I suppose we will find out. I do think he's going to win, although recent reports say that Biden is like days away from quitting the race, and we'll see how Kamala fares in the polls and in the I guess there's going to be debates. But yeah, it's interesting times in that respect as well. Daniel?
Well, what sort of stance do you think Trump is likely to take on the Israel-Gaza situation if he wins?
I don't know, because you can't, it's difficult to say Trump, okay, here's his here are his principles, and here's how we're gonna think he's likely to apply those principles to any given situation. I mean, I liked what he said in the debate about Israel, but I liked most of what Biden said in the debate about Israel, except the thing about we stopped sending them Israel two-ton bombs because they're not very effective in urban warfare, which of course is completely incorrect. But yeah, they say certain things, and then it's going to be interesting to see what they'll do. I don't know. Look, we're 6 months away from the inauguration. We don't know if this war will still be going on. I think if it's not, then it should be hopefully restarted by the next government without waiting for the next big terrorist attack. But I don't expect that to be the case. Yeah, Daniel.
And you mentioned earlier, Razi, that Netanyahu should go, and I tend to agree with that. But do you think that would change anything, really? I mean, he should take the consequences of his inactions, I guess, but will it really change anything?
No, yeah, I think he should go because of his actions up until now. He's been prime minister for the better part of the last 2 decades. He led Israel to this point, and he failed to act accordingly when Israel got to this point. So, for everything he's done up until now, he needs to go. And then, will something better come along? I don't know. I did say we did an episode about Israeli politics a few days ago on the Daily Objective. I did say that this uh, new right-wing party seems like it could be less bad than what we have at the moment, especially since, according to the polls, if it happens, it's going to win, and it's gonna have a bigger right-wing coalition than what exists at the moment, and less of an excuse for inaction. But less of an excuse is still an excuse, and where there are no excuses, politicians will find them anyway. So yeah, it's mostly Netanyahu being there is an injustice. Daniel, parting thoughts?
I just wanted to quickly check something on Netanyahu. So I pulled up his Wikipedia and it said the ninth prime minister of Israel, and I didn't know if that's a count or if whatever. But something I wanted to mention from what Matthew was talking about, the fact that Israel always gets blamed. And I think that's, if you were to draw like a philosophical understanding of this, I think it really is the fact, it is in a sense, using what is good about Israel against it. Hamas doesn't allow any dissent. Hamas doesn't allow any, free press like talking against them or people protesting against the government. Israel does, and that is used against Israel. The fact that that you can freely express your opinion against Israel is basically used against Israel. And I think that's something, you cannot solve it by stopping it, but the fact that it is used in this specific way is I think very problematic. And again, the fact that the hostages are not back in Israel is blamed on Israel, not on the people who are actually behind it, which is Hamas.
Matthew, parting thoughts?
I don't think I've got anything I want to add, really.
And Anders.
Well, I always try to think of something positive to say at the end, because it tends to get very depressing if you're focusing too much on politics. So we obviously live in a world that materially is probably better than it has ever been. And I'm always thinking back to Ayn Rand's words in this situation, that those who fight for the future live in it today. I think that is a very profound psychological statement, because just fighting the good fight is helping you through these hard times. So.
Well, I will also end on a positive note by reading Race's comment here in the chat. Race says James didn't get many questions in the constitutional law session last week because people were so entranced with his presentation. They didn't want to break the spell. Race, not Race. That's how he pronounced his name. It's not.
Well, what I heard is, I'm gonna read a racist comment, and I was like, Jesus.
Well,
okay.
no, I meant I am reading.
That's what I thought too.
Race Jacobson.
Okay.
Race. If your name is pronounced different, it's not spelled the same way as race, as in racist. Anyway, and Bonnie, I will read again Bonnie's comment from the Daily Objective on Friday, the day after the first session, which is still open to all members. The Constitution recording is the best thing I've ever heard. So if that's not a good enough reason to spend the next hour listening to that session, we're even wrapping up a few minutes early. So if you are a Reardon Metal or Midas Mulligan member, you have time to watch it, and I think you'll miss some of the Q&A. But yeah, make sure you watch that first session if you are a member at any level. You still have enough time to do that. If you also have enough time to become a member at the Reardon Metal or Midas Mulligan levels, or upgrade to those levels if you want to do so. And of course, if you do so later, you will get access to the recordings. Yeah, this is James at his absolute best, so I recommend it very strongly. Anders, where can people find more from you?
You can find me on Substack, andersingemarsson.substack.com. And the third expanded edition of my book, Think Right or Wrong, Not Left or Right, is now available for pre-order, the ebook version, on any Amazon site around the world. And I can provide you, Daniel, with a link to that so people can find that easily in the notes.
Yeah, we will put that link in the description. Matthew, where can people find more from you?
I'm on social media. I think we usually put my X account in the description. Come and find me.
Yeah. And Daniel, where can people find you?
I'm Damned Dan on YouTube, and that's also gonna be in the description.
I am Razi Ginsburg on X, and I am on this channel regularly, so you can find me here as well. Thanks, guys, for joining. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you back here with the Daily Objective and the reality show tomorrow.